Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shazi and IFPH, International Forum of Promoting Homeopathy, and Dr. Vibha for introducing me to such a wonderful platform. And I've been reading a lot on WhatsApp and all about this forum, and it's a really honor for all of our homeopathic fellow being to come together and work for such a wonderful cause. So, as what Madam has introduced me, I have been working since quite a long time on various acute diseases because I feel as a physician when I started my training, everybody had this concept that homeopathy should be given in chronic illnesses, and if we prescribe in acute, it doesn't work or it takes a lot of time. So that was a lot of feedbacks which was there when I was growing as a student. That's why I chose to work on this field. So today's topic is homeopathic treatment of acute diseases. My screen is visible to all.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it is the least explored path of homeopathy, a journey of curing acutes, emergencies, and IPD cases with homeopathy uh, as over a period of 15 years. So before we talk about acutes, let us understand what you mean by acutes and what you mean by emergency. So something which is serious, unexpected situation involving uh, illnesses or acute injuries, and it requires immediate action or treatment plan. This is what you mean by acutes. So in case if we delay in by underestimating or not understanding what the illness is all about, we may miss the golden period and we may not be able to produce result or produce the necessary cure which is required. So resuscitation is often considered as fast-paced treatment and may have to be done before reaching the final conclusion of the disease diagnosis. So many a times when the patient comes, suppose example, patient has collapsed. We know there are so many remedies for collapse, like you can give camphor, you can give carboveg, and etc. 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 from homeopathy. But we need to reach the diagnosis of the case because we there are multiple reasons why the person has collapsed. It can be a hypoglycemia, or it can be just a vertebrovascular insufficiency, or it can be a myocardial infarct. So the disease diagnosis at this stage becomes very important. And what I have understood over a period of 15 years is until unless we don't diagnose the disease, the intervention with homeopathy becomes very difficult and the cure is a further more difficult. So, what is needed for a homeopath to handle an acute disease or any kind of acutes? No disease is free from acute presentation. That is what I feel. All the diseases, even if the chronic diseases, when it comes to us, it may be too late. But obviously, initial stages it always presents with acute presentation right at its onset, nor it limits itself without throwing any acute expression during the course of the treatment. Like example, if you're treating a case of bronchial asthma, there are it's although it is defined as a chronic disease which is dynamic with fully miasmatic presentation, but there are presentations where there are acute exacerbation which needs to be intervened timely so that the patient is at ease, the person is confident, okay, the person is under homeopathic treatment. Even during acute, patients can be tackled with our homeopathic line of treatment. What do you mean by hospital homeopathy? And what I understand of hospital homeopathy, it means that diagnosis, along with diagnosis, we investigate, and lately, wherever the complete observation of the symptoms are there, and then we have to be keeping a minute observation of all the symptoms, and whenever the opportunity comes, we have to strike. So all this thing in homeopathy and hospitalization, it is considered as modern integrated homeopathy, which is a need of an hour and which each one of us to understand. The example here I would give is if you are treating a case of, say, acute exacerbation of asthma, or say acute exacerbation of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or say a person with a complicated pneumonia, there are situations where we have to admit the patient, we have to use an auxiliary and ancillary line of treatment where oxygen may be required. Along with that, we have to give homeopathy. So this is known as an integrated concept of homeopathy, which has to be accepted by all of us. And after accepting, we can definitely deliver better results. So when we do, what you mean by IPD is inpatient department, where we admit the patient and hospitalize the patient and treat them. So inpatient department, I have experience of say around 15 years with dealing with inpatient department and treating the patients. What is the foremost thing for each and every doctor like us, the youngsters like us? First is the attitude towards looking at the patient, attitude of understanding what is a prerequisite for admitting that particular patient, what is an indication for admission. Then sacrificing, I mean that patient is a first priority, that all the other things are rest secondary. First priority is patient. So that we mean by sacrificing means, if you get a call at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock at midnight, we have to attend the patient, we have to understand the patient, give the necessary medicine which is required, so that the necessary cure or the necessary results can be produced. And other important thing is never say no, means don't refuse the calls, always be available to the patient, and that is the main thing which is required. So here, without taking much of your valuable time, I would like to share a few experiences from inpatient department. So this is a case of a 15-year-old girl. She was already a known case of bronchial asthma, and she presented with sudden onset severe breathlessness. The breathlessness was grade 4 dyspnea. When we say grade 4 dyspnea, it means dyspnea which is even at rest. Grade 1 means dyspnea which is produced when the person has exerted out of proportion, which the person was never accustomed to. Grade 2 means when the person is uh, exerted uh, with whatever regular work he has exerted and he has become breathless. Or the third grade is a grade where less than where in case a person was suppose every day walks for 500 meter, and today with 100-meter walk or 200-meter walk the person has become breathless. So that is grade 3, and grade 4 is at rest. So this girl, 15 years old girl, remember, 15 years old girl, known case of bronchial asthma, she becomes breathless with grade 4 dyspnea, and this presentation was since 2 days. So this means this is an acute exacerbation of bronchial asthma. And here she had lot of cough, which was a choking cough with breathlessness, which was not relieved by bronchodilator. She had already gone to a respiratory physician and and she was not been responding to the bronchodilators, rotahalers or inhalers, which she had already received. She had undergone nebulization and all the necessary primary line of treatment. So this is the in short what we say, the presentation. Now here, as we all know, without cause, there is no disease presentation. So as per the organon of medicine aphorism, there has to be a precipitating or causative factor which has resulted into this particular problem. So in our particular case, she had actually she is a young girl, so fond of drinking cold drinks and all. So what she did is she drank a very chilled sweet lime juice. So what she had done is she had prepared a juice and kept it in the freezer section of the refrigerator, and after that she just melted it and just she drank it, and thereafter she landed up with this problem of breathlessness. Other important thing which we got during a very short history, because there is no time left. Patient is in acute spasm, although she has not responded to bronchodilator. We have to take whatever short brief history which we could get. She cannot tolerate heat at all. She requires to take bath with cold water. That is what we had got. So she is a hot patient. She has got a cough, choking cough, acute onset breathlessness, which has started after she had taken a chilled sweet lime juice. On examination, what we found is her oxygen saturation was fluctuating between 72 to 74%. Normally, it should be more than 90%, and 95 and above is the best, what is required. Respiratory rate was around 30 per minute. Her pulse rate was 124 per minute. She was tachycardic because of tachypnea, and her accessory muscles of respiration was active. So what we did is, so this was what how she was presenting with. Can you see the video?
It's not opened.
Not visible yet.
Not visible. Okay, just a minute. Can you see now?
No.
This can be seen.
No.
Okay, so we'll continue with the presentation.
Okay.
रात में खांसी आ रही थी, वो लगाओ ना। ये निकाला था हाँ, रात में खांसी आ रही थी, वो लगाओ ना। ये निकाला था।
Hope you could see the video.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
So, so here, being a young patient, it appears that she's having a distress, but she's having a good tolerance also. her saturation was 72%. Okay, so this was what and as I've already mentioned, she was tachypneic and she was tachycardic also. So now here clinical diagnosis, as I've already mentioned, it is an acute exacerbation of the bronchial asthma. The presentation is sudden onset severe breathlessness, grade 4, cough with choking types. Causation being ailments after taking a chilled sweet lime juice. Oxygen saturation, which is fluctuating around 72, hypoxic with accessory muscles of respiration active. Uh, as we have already mentioned that there is a tight bronchospasm as seen through the diagrams, and all this presentation is over a period of 2 days, which is not relieved by rotahilis or inhalers, nebulizer, and bronchodilators. Her investigation showed that she had a severe eosinophilia with absolute eosinophilic count of 1360. Her X-ray chest was within normal limit without any consolidative changes on the X-ray. So as we have already mentioned that she had an acute exacerbation of bronchial asthma, and since she has this continuous episode since last 2 days, so she can be classified as a status asthmaticus with hypoxia. So what do you mean by status asthmaticus? Status asthmaticus is defined as a life-threatening condition or form of asthma where there is a progressive worsening attack which is unresponsive. The important thing is unresponsiveness to the bronchodilators or whatever the line of treatment is required to the usual appropriate therapy with adrenergic drugs or bronchodilators, and that may lead to pulmonary insufficiency. Pulmonary insufficiency means the person may land up with hypoxia and eventually with respiratory failure. So oxygen saturation in our patient with 72%, which is progressive, if it is not tackled, it may lead to pulmonary insufficiency or respiratory distress. To treat with, here the option is whether to take the patient homeopathically or give a steroid and relieve the inflammatory process. So patient is not responding to bronchodilator. The next responsive line of treatment is usually giving a aminophylline drip or giving a corticosteroids in such cases. And here we are trying to tackle the patient with homeopathy. So here, if we choose to tackle the patient or treat the patient with homeopathy, what should be the therapeutic strategy? This is the important thing which we have to keep in mind. Here, first is I always mention that auxiliary and supportive line of treatment is very important when we are tackling with inpatient department patients. So starting with oxygen is very mandatory because 72% is very bad. If she progressively goes down, then it becomes difficult because she may land up with respiratory acidosis and there may be cellular changes. So relieving the bronchospasm is the second utmost thing which we have to do. So while addressing to this, relieving the bronchospasm, we have to understand the causation, as causation becomes a very important symptom in the evaluation order or in the totality of the symptoms, which may lead to the direct entry into a right similimum. So here causation is drinking a very chilled sweet lime juice and the effect which produced after drinking the chilled sweet lime juice was the asthma. So these are the two important prominent things which we have got in this particular case. There are not much characteristics apart from the causation and the effect it produced. So let us understand what is the importance of understanding the cause. If you take reference to the organon of medicine, according to aphorism 5, useful to the physician is assisting him to cure are the particulars of most probable exciting cause. Most probable or exciting cause is the very important thing which will assist a physician for curing a case in case of an acute disease. So this is what has been mentioned in Organon textbook. If we go further, And if you read Dr. M.L. Dhawale's literature, especially from the book Principles and Practice of Homeopathy, in the chapter of symptomatology, what it has written is the precipitating factors takes precedence in an acute prescription. So the precipitating factor or the causative factor is the topmost thing while we are addressing an acute disease. The direct representation of causative factors in the prescription of a remedy in homeopathic practice is a unique feature in therapeutics and is responsible for large measures of success it meets. That means if you take the right causation in that particular case, especially in an acute disease, the therapeutic success is guaranteed. So the cause, if you understand the cause, it's the chilled juice which is not available in the repertory. So the closest synonym which we can take is chilled icy cold water. Chilled icy cold water is what we can get the exact, because the patient had described very minutely that she had taken a juice and she had put it into the freezer so that it becomes an ice. Then she waited for it to melt and then directly she drank the entire glass of that ice melted juice. So when we look into the synthesis repertory with the same causation of chilled icy cold water, in the generality section, food and drinks chapter, in the generality chapter, food and drinks section, what we find is cold drink, aggravation, ice water. And in this particular rubric, the remedies which we get is Carboveg, Digitalis, Elapse, Kalicarb, Kali iode, Mephitis, Natrum carb, Rustox, and Veratrum viridi. So these are the group of remedies which are there in this causation. Now, one part we have already fixed, or we have already addressed by fixing the causation, by referring that causation into the repertory. The other part of it is now is the effect. So let us understand what effect this chilled icy cold water will produce in various drugs. So if we start differentiating the few drugs out of it, is the drugs which we should differentiate is the Carboveg, Kalicarb, and Mephitis. So if we read the sphere of action of all these three drugs, Mephitis is supposedly on the nerves, Kalicarb is supposedly on the mucous membranes and especially the respiratory tract. Carboveg is again mucous membrane as well as the circulatory system, and as we all know, it is also a good remedy for the GI tract. The symptoms, which is aggravation with ice water, is covered by Mephitis, where it is mentioned that aggravation by cold application, cold air, as well as ice cold water, which is mentioned in Mephitis. Kalicarb is also worse by cold water. It is also worse by cold weather, and it has also got a precipitating time modality. Carboveg, it is worse in cold damp weather. Carboveg is worse in cold damp weather. Now let us understand the symptom of the patient. Asthma worse after taking a chilled or an icy cold juice. So if that particular thing, if you take the reference, it is covered by Mephitis. We will show the references later on. Ice water, which aggravates the asthma, it is specifically given in Mephitis. Then the spasmodic cough which the patient had, which was worse by talking, and she was just sitting up as you saw in the video, and she could not lie down. And that is specifically, if you understand, it is given that cough aggravation by speaking, drinking, or night aggravation is given in Mephitis. Kalicarb also mentions that the cough and asthmatic episodes or respiratory difficulties worse while lying down at night, and patient is overall better by warmth. Similarly, Carboveg is also mentioned anything which is cold and lying down and evening aggravation will worsen the cough. Choking sensation is mentioned in Mephitis as well as it has been given in Kalicarb. So now we have understood the cause, we have understood the effect which these three drugs have got on the respiratory tract. So if you understand, the further thing is the generals of the patient. That patient is a hot patient, needs a cold bathing, and if you consider this, both Kalicarb and Carboveg are chilly remedies. They are highly chilly remedy. They are worse by cold bathing and cold in any form. So the only remedy which we are left with is Mephitis. Mephitis. Out of the three, two are chilly remedy. Our patient is a hot patient. If you understand the cause and effect, which is covered by Mephitis more in comparison to Kalicarb and the Carboveg. So let us understand Mephitis when we take reference from the other source books, like we talk about the repertory, Phatak repertory. When we repertorize the choking sensation and asthma, bronchial, ice water aggravation, if this two rubric is taken, Mephitis is a drug which is covering both the symptoms. If you take reference from Phatak's repertory, then, as I've already mentioned, synthesis repertory. Again, if you take asthmatic cold water aggravation and choking, is covered by Mephitis. Now we take Materia Medica reference. If you read Dictionary of Practical Materia Medica by Clark, ice water leading to asthma is mentioned in Clark's Materia Medica with choking sensation and cough. And if you read William Borick, Materia Medica, suffocating feeling, asthmatic paroxysm, and spasmodic cough, so violent, worse at night, has been mentioned by Borick. And when we read Phatak's Materia Medica, it is mentioned that the asthma is worse by ice water and it produces a spasmodic effect, and it is a very, very good remedy for whooping cough. So the remedy which is now after reference coming up very strongly is Mephitis. Mephitis Putorium. So this is a Clark's Materia Medica reference. If you see very carefully, ice water leading to asthma, ice water worsening the asthma is mentioned in Mephitis, and patient is in general better by cold washing. So this is a contradictory thing which is seen. One hand, patient is getting uh, aggravated with the respiratory system with cold, icy cold drinks, and other hand, patient is wanting and getting ameliorated with cold washing. It's a contradictory modality, and it is a contrasting modality which is very important in prescribing in after we take reference from homeopathic Materia Medica. So so this case demonstrates the role of homeopathy even in emergency condition, effectiveness and alertness in prescribing, monitoring and successful application, and the concept of the keynotes. This is what we learned. And when we were trying to use this remedy, we went through a few unique doctrine of this particular remedy, which I would like to share on this platform. Mephitis is prepared from the anal gland secretion of the skunk, which is a mammal. So what happens is, this is a mammal which is named as skunk. So the anal gland of this particular animal secretes a unique secretion, and the Mephitis is actually prepared from that. The skunk secretes this secretion from the anal gland whenever there is a danger. Whenever they anticipate the danger, they secrete this, and they try to disguise, or they want to escape from the predators or the enemies, because this particular secretion produce a very foul smell, so that they can get rid of the animals or other predators or enemies. So the response of this secretion, which is from the anal gland of the skunk mammal, is it produces the symptoms of lacrimation and rhinitis and asthma-like effect. So this is what a very unique thing which we were referring, and during reference we found this unique doctrine. So I thought it's how effective it is while we are studying from a doctrine angle the Materia Medica. So remedy selection was Mephitis in 30 potency. where we started first dilution. Your first dilution means we take a 1 glass of water, we put around 10 to 15 pills, we mix that, make a solution, and then we give 3 tablespoons every 30 minutes. Can you see this video?
No,
16
only audio is going.
मैं नासिक से यहाँ पे आई तभी मेरे को ब्रेकलेस
Now you can see.
Hi, I'm Aishwarya Mohite. My age is 16.
Can you see this?
15 days पहले जब मैं नासिक से यहाँ पे आई तभी मेरे को ब्रेथलेस बहुत फील हो रहा था। तो अभी 3 दिन पहले जब मैंने मौसमी का जूस पिया रात को, इट वॉज वेरी चिली, तो मेरे को बहुत ज़्यादा मेरे को अस्थमा का अटैक आया। तो जब मतलब मैंने इन्हेलर यूज़ किया, लाइक पूरा एक दिन में पूरा एक इन्हेलर ख़त्म कर दिया, तो कुछ फ़र्क नहीं था। फिर मेरे को यहाँ पे एडमिट किया। उसके बाद मेरे को ऑक्सीजन भी लगाया था। स्टार्टिंग के 2 दिन कुछ रिलीफ नहीं मिला मेरे को। 2 मिनट के लिए चलती हुई थी तो भी मेरे को ब्रेथलेस फील होता था। वापस इन्हेलर लेना पड़ रहा था,
बट उससे कुछ भी नहीं फर्क पड़ता था। फिर जैसे ये मेडिसिन
So, could you see the video?
No.
You could
Now
not.
it is not visible.
No, I showed
Now
you.
it is not visible.
Now, okay. Now I've
Yeah.
switched it off. Previously you saw. So basically, that was before and after video. So over a period
Yeah.
of patient improve over a period of 72 to say 96 hours. So on the 4th day, we had planned the discharge of the patient, and she was absolutely fine. That is what she was trying to say. And the summarize, if you summarize the full case, what we learned from this, the various concept which was demonstrated in this particular case was concept of the knowledge of the disease. First is the diagnosis of the disease, understanding that which stage of the disease the person has come to us, because the stage of the disease will determine the further line of treatment, whether it is homeopathy, and if patient is not responding with the homeopathy, what is the second and third line of treatment we should keep in mind, because patient is our responsibility and we are the physician first. So that is our utmost responsibility. Second, when we are treating such cases, what are the auxiliary and ancillary line of treatment? Like, we are providing oxygen. Secondly, if the patient's condition is not improving, maybe we may have to do an arterial blood gas analysis also, ABG, that is known as ABG. We tap the femoral artery and radial artery and send the blood for arterial blood gas analysis to understand what is the pH of the blood and what is the oxygen levels in the arterial blood. That is what we need to keep in mind. Then concept of emergency strategy is very important. What is the first thing? If we stabilize the patient, give the oxygen, and thereafter we start taking the case, that will be a better strategy rather than just keeping the patient gasping and taking the history. So that is the order or the sequence in which we need to take the step is very important. Then the doctrine or signature concept which we learned from this particular case. Then what is important is when we are repertorizing and when we are giving the medicine, simultaneously there is something called as a teamwork, and we need to have a teamwork where there are interns and all. We need to tell them that you refer this particular book, and the referencing is important from the source book. Referencing is very important because one particular sentence if you find in Materia Medica, and that particular drug can work like magic. Then concept of documentation of clinical progress means if I am taking the patient, then I have to keep all the parameters like the pulse, the BP, and the saturation, and the RS findings, and how the patient is improving, what is the state of the patient. That all this thing has to be kept in mind. And foremost important thing is identify the cause. Whenever we are taking a short history and a brief history in an acute, first thing is identify or strike at the cause why this person is suffering. So that is very important thing which we need to keep in mind. So it's a very short case, but it has taught us a lot of things, and that's why I felt it's my duty to share in on this platform. So this was one of the case from the respiratory angle. So now let us see another case with a cardiac etiology or cardiac problems. So this is a case of an acute onset cardiac arrhythmias. So this is a patient who is a 50 years old female, and she is a known case of hypothyroidism. She's already a known case of hypothyroidism, 50 years female. He presented to us with left-sided chest pain, and this chest pain, here the pain was radiating to the left arm along with palpitation. So the main presentation was chest pain and palpitation. Chest pain and palpitation, that was the left-sided. So it is an alarming thing. We feel that there must be some cardiac event, or there must be some acute coronary syndrome kind of picture. And along with that, she was complaining that my left arm is feeling little weak. There was weakness of left arm. So 50 years old female, known case of hypothyroidism. She presenting with a precordial pain with left-sided radiation to the left arm, with left arm little weakness, with palpitation. So this was the main presentation. So when we summarize chest pain, left-sided radiation to left arm, palpitation, and patient is overall a hot patient. Prefers more of cold weather, and more of fan and air conditioning. That was our preferences. Thermally hot. So when we take a lot of symptoms are there, but I'm just trying to project what is relevant in this particular case. On examination, it was found that she had a heart rate. When we do a auscultation, when we found that the heart rate was around 124 per minute. Then when we checked her pulse, it was 100 per minute. And when we were doing an heart sound examination by auscultation, we found that there is an apex pulse deficit. So here, that is very important. What do you mean by apex pulse deficit? Apex pulse deficit means when we are auscultating the heart rate over the precordial area, the heart rate is around 124, but the same pulse rate is around 100. So there is a difference of 124 minus 100. That is, there is a difference of 24 per minute. So there is a difference of 24 per minute. Her BP was 140 by 90, and her respiratory tract was absolutely normal. RS was clear. Her sugars were 107 milligram per deciliter, and muscle power in the left arm was 5 by 5 grade. So now, when we are counting the heart rate and pulse rate simultaneously for a minute, the difference between the two is termed as apex pulse deficit. So, what do you mean? What is the inference of apex pulse deficit? It means the heart is pumping at a particular speed, and the conduction of the waves at the level of the pulse is little lesser in comparison to the heart pumping. So there is some asynchrony which we are trying to find. Okay, in this particular case, here the heart rate was 124, pulse rate was 100, and the apex pulse deficit was of 24 per minute. So on investigation on ECG, so whenever you find an apex pulse deficit, let us do an ECG. As it is, patient is complaining predominantly of chest pain and palpitation. So we should do an ECG. When we did ECG, when we see very closely, if you are seeing an ECG, now we have to concentrate on the long lead 2, If you see, we see the RR interval. If you see, RR interval is irregularly irregular. It is not regularly irregular, but irregularly irregular means the distance between two PQRS complexes are irregularly irregular. Somewhere it is broad, somewhere it is narrow, somewhere it is broad, again narrow. So there is irregularity, but there is no regularity in this irregularity. It is irregularly irregular. This is one thing which we observe. Second thing, we look for the P wave. P wave, we cannot see the P wave. See, P wave is not predominantly seen. So in an ECG, in a long lead 2, if there is an irregularly irregular heartbeat with absent P wave, is an hallmark of, it's an hallmark of atrial fibrillation. See, atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is nothing but it's a form of arrhythmia which is originating from the atria, and atrial fibrillation, it often presents with the apex pulse deficit. The problem with atrial fibrillation is the atrial contractions are not effective, so the atria is not getting empty completely into the ventricle, and this is the reason why the patient often have the end stroke volume is very low, and patient may land up with giddiness because there is insufficiency of the blood to the brain and other vital organs. And another important thing is because the atria is not pumping properly, so there is stagnation of blood in the atrium, which may lead to excess of embolus formation. The emboli may form. So that's why if a patient with atrial fibrillation, if there is an embolus in the atria, the patient can land up with the dislodgement of this embolus into the various systems of the body, and predominantly in the brain area. If it goes, it may lead to cerebrovascular accident or stroke. So this patient is a potentially a threatening patient. We have to keep a close observation on this patient. We have diagnosed the case. Patient has presented with cardiological symptoms. We diagnose the case. There is a possibility that patient may land up with some kind of stroke in future. So you have to treat this patient very, 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 very effectively and carefully with proper monitoring of all the various parameters. So as patient was complaining of chest pain, so the important thing is we have to rule out acute coronary syndrome, or there should not be any insufficiency to the cardiac muscles, which can be picked up by doing a test known as troponin I, which is a very sensitive and a specific test for the cardiac injury, as well as CPK-MB, which is again related to the cardiac muscle. So both troponin I was negative and CPK-MB was normal. So this is what we had done. So one hand, we are ruling out acute coronary syndrome. other hand, we have diagnosed that this patient is a case of atrial fibrillation, there is a possibility that patient may have arrhythmia and acute coronary syndrome together. So we have to actually, as a protocol, do these tests. Other, she's also already a known case of hypothyroidism. So her free T4 is 1.09, which is a very low, little lower on side. TSH is within the normal range, but free T4, which is more specific for hypothyroidism, is low. When we did a 2D echo and ECG, 2D echo was showing that patient with having a fast ventricular rate, and the reason probably in this particular case for developing atrial fibrillation is that she has underlying rheumatic heart disease, which has been missed, and she has developed a moderate mitral stenosis. Means she had a rheumatic heart disease, she has developed a mitral stenosis. Right now, she has landed up with atrial fibrillation, which she didn't even have a knowledge about this. So this is, but the ejection fraction is 55%, which is a averagely a good ejection fraction. So here it has been a sudden onset phenomena. Patient presented with tachycardia, presented with chest pain and palpitation. Irregularity of the rhythm was seen, and there was absent P wave. And in a known case of hypothyroidism, the diagnosis, as I've already mentioned, patient is with atrial fibrillation with underlying rheumatic heart disease, which we diagnosed with an 2D echo, and with a mitral stenosis. So this is a complete functional as well as the structural diagnosis of the case. Okay, so this is what we have now summarized. Now the objective is we have to somehow bring her rhythm into a normal rhythm. We have to convert this tachyarrhythmias. Normally, conventional line of treatment, what a modern medicine doctor will do is give a anti-arrhythmic agents and give a digoxin as a or digitalis derivative. That is, digoxin is started in such cases. So basically, if you understand, atrial fibrillation is a very common form of arrhythmias with rapid irregular heart rate, and it produces apex pulse deficit. As I've already explained, what is the reason for apex pulse deficit? Because each ventricular contraction may not be sufficiently strong to transmit an arterial pulse wave through the peripheral artery. That is the reason why we can't feel that 124 heart rate. It is not being transmitted into the peripheral pulse. So caution during the treatment of atrial fibrillation. Patient can go into complications like stroke. Patient may land up with, if the arrhythmia is not under control, patient may get aggravated into a very severe form of atrial fibrillation. Heart failure is known, and there is a possibility of cardiomyopathy because patient already has an underlying valvular heart disease. So usually medical line of treatment is antiarrhythmic drug, which has been given by modern medicine cardiologists, anticoagulant therapy, so that if there is any form of bits of embolus, it can be tackled by giving an antiplatelet drug, or cardioversion. If the arrhythmia doesn't settle down, what they do is they do a cardioversion by giving electric shocks or DC shock by with the help of a defibrillator. That is what has been done so that it can restore the normal sinus rhythm. And in case still it is not successful, then they put a cardiac catheter and they find out where is the abnormal focus of the arrhythmia, and there they do a ablation therapy. They burn that particular area so that ectopic focus is burnt. So this is what they do it from modern medicine. Why we need to know all this thing is, if everything goes fine with medical line of treatment or with homeopathic line of treatment, then it is very good. But in case if patient doesn't respond, there is always a possibility that patient may get better, may not get better. So we should know the entire options which are available and how we can provide this treatment in case if this patient does not improve. So can we replace all these things by giving a homeopathic medicine? Yes, we should try to tackle with homeopathy with due caution, with due monitoring and proper vigilance. this was a question mark which was there in my mind when I started this treatment. So before we start any treatment, I always classify in my mind that it's a acute exacerbation of chronic miasmatic disease with one-sided symptomatology. Predominantly, patient has got only cardiac tissue symptoms coming up, and it is a chronic disease, as we have seen from 2D echo that patient has got rheumatic heart disease with mitral stenosis, and that's how it has got acute exacerbation in form of atrial fibrillation. According to aphorism number 175, it is mentioned about the one-sided symptoms or one-sided diseases. In one aphorism number 175, it is mentioned that in one-sided diseases of the first kind, it is often to be attributed to the medical observer want of discernment, that he does not fully discover the symptoms actually present, which would enable him to complete the sketch of the or the portrait of the disease. We don't get that particular entire picture. So here, rheumatic heart disease, I'm just conceptualizing the case at this stage. Mitral stenosis, and the heart is the main seat of disease. Okay. Then the left-sided chest pain, radiation. So left-sided chest pain and left arm and palpitation, which is also not very characteristic, because chest pain in a cardiac problem is quite common. Then since it is on the left side, radiation on the left side with cardiac pathology is also very common, and atrial fibrillation. So all this thing is looks to be very common kind of a thing. All this thing has started suddenly. This is what we have right now. The concept of totality. Now, how do we form the totality in this particular case, which I was trying to find? Everything looks to be very common. All symptoms, though, appear common to the disease, but characteristic because of its high intensity. So the intensity, let us understand the intensity and give it as a characteristic trait because of its mere intensity. So concept of unusual association means all this thing looks very common, but if when they are clubbed together, see heart, the chest pain, the left-sided radiation with severe intensity, with palpitation, and the atrial fibrillation. All this thing, if you read separately or see separately, it looks very common. But when it comes together, that's known as concept of unusual association. We can make a totality at this stage, especially in cases which have got a very scanty or paucity of symptom, or maybe a one-sided symptoms. So here the patient's susceptibility is low to moderate because symptom similarity, if you see characteristic expression of the disease at pathological level, reversibility of atrial fibrillation is still a possibility that we can reverse the atrial fibrillation, and there is a structural irreversible pathology which is a mitral stenosis. So here the susceptibility, we will take it as a low susceptibility to maybe a mid level or a moderate susceptibility. I will say moderate because the characteristicness, because of the intensity of the symptom. Rest all the pathological symptoms are there in this. So it is more towards low. Miasmatically, if you understand, seems to be more from tubercular angle because it has been a very sudden arrhythmic presentation. And all this while patient was having a disease which was underlying disease never had a presentation. It's a sudden manifestation in form of arrhythmias. Arrhythmias are often classified as asynchronous, irregular firing of the action or the waves or the what we say rhythm potentials, which is out of proportion, and that's how I personally understood as a tubercular myasm. Then now we take the rubric selection, where the chest pain, where the extending to the left arm, chest pain which is radiating from the heart, chest pain with a rheumatic heart, and chest with palpitation of heart irregular. So these are few symptoms which we selected as a rubric, and we repertorize this. Chest pain extending to the left arm, chest pain radiating to the heart, and chest pain, rheumatic heart, and irregularity with palpitation of the heart. So if you take this in account, the remedies which are coming up with Scalmia, arsenic, Naja, Spigelia digitalis, and Lachesis. So these are the group of remedies which are coming up. So differential remedies, Kalmia, Cactus, Spigelia, Digitalis. These were the few remedies which we picked up for differentiation. Cactus was selected because it has a predominant cardiac manifestation. So we thought that let us select Cactus also for differentiation. So when we were taking Materia Medica references, so we started reading Kalmia. Kalmia, when we were reading from bogus Materia Medica or Synoptic Key. Synoptic Key, I would like to add, is a very, very interesting book, because whenever there is paucity of symptom, whereas the predominant pathology, I always prefer to use Synoptic Key, especially this section where there is a region and the tissues which have been mentioned. What are the various tissue affinity of that particular drug? And secondly, as Boger has already was already following Bonning-Olsen, so he has kept this modality section also, which is very, very handy, because when an acute presentation comes, patient is obviously disturbed with a particular organ, and they often present with some or the other form of modalities. So these two sections are right at the top of the Materia Medica, which goes very hand in hand while we are prescribing. So let us come back to this particular patient. So when we were reading Kalmia, then the tissue affinity or the region involved is heart and circulation. And other important, when we were reading the sensation, typical sensation and pathological, this thing which is given is the weakness which is experienced by the patient. Then there are hard, sharp pains which are radiating to the left scapula or the left arm, which is mentioned in the bogus synoptic key. Then when we were reading Borik's Materia Medica, we found there is fluttering of heart with anxiety. That means there is palpitation, and that is specifically because of the rheumatic metastasis of the heart. If you read Borik's Materia Medica, it is mentioned that rheumatic metastasis of the heart, tachycardia with pain. Then other reference which we took is the shooting through the chest above the heart into the shoulder blades, frequent pulse, and tumultuous or rapid visible heart action. So that means there is a fibrillation kind of an activity with palpitation which is seen in this particular drug. So when we were going through all the other drugs also, the Cactus was predominantly, with that cage sensation or the tightness around the chest. Digitalis also had a lot of arrhythmias. Along with that, there was predominant GI symptoms of nausea, vomiting and all. And Spigelia was predominantly neuralgic pains, out of which the remedy which has got predominant rheumatic manifestation was Kalmia. So we were more into, getting into further details of Kalmia. And when we read about Kalmia, it is mentioned that according to the doctrine, when we were reading, it was that it secretes a toxin which is also called as arbutin, and it lead to a cardiac dysfunction. Arbutin leads to a cardiac dysfunction. So the leaves of or the flowers of the Kalmia, when you take an extract, there is a toxin which is known as arbutin, and it has got affinity to produce cardiac dysfunction. So here we started with Kalmia in 200 potency, and we gave 5 pills every 10 minutes. Here we selected the regime of giving 10 minutes is because we were more worried with the arrhythmias, because as we have already mentioned, there are high chances of neurological and other forms of complication with this particular kind of cardiac abnormality. So we thought of giving 5 minutes every 10 minutes, 5 pills every 10 minutes. The follow-up criteria while treating such patient was the symptomatological criteria, that is a chest pain and the arm pain with weakness and palpitation. The clinical finding of heart rate, pulse, heart sound, and about apex pulse deficit, and obviously the ECG. So every hourly we were keeping a follow-up on this particular patient. Vigilance, alertness, monitoring with intermittent cardiac monitoring is also important. So the day one, when we started Kalmia, the patient had 124 to 126 per minute heart rate. Pulse was 100 per minute. and we, as already mentioned, 24 was the apex pulse deficit, and patient had predominantly left-sided chest pain and radiation to left arm with palpitation. Yeah, this was the ECG which I have already showed to you. Then the day 2, the heart rate had come down to 98 per minute, 98 per minute. So in our period of 24 hours, on next day morning, we found that heart rate has come down 98 per minute. Pulse is 90 per minute. So here now the apex pulse deficit is 8, which is a non-significant, and BP is within a normal range, 130/80. Her main presentation of chest pain is much better. Pain in the left arm is better, and the palpitation has improved. Day 3, when we did the ECG, now you can see, if you can see again, the long lead to here, the RR interval, if you can see, they are well spaced. The rhythm has settled down, and the rhythm is regularized. If you can see, the interval between this RR interval is quite synchronized now compared to the first ECG. So this is what changes which we found after using Kalmia in 200 potency, 5 pills every 10 minutes. So this is the diagram which shows how the difference of apex pulse deficit which was there. Blue color mark is the heart rate, blue one is the heart rate, and the red one is the pulse, and the green one is the apex pulse deficit. The day 1 it was almost 24, then it came down to 8, and now there is no difference between the heart rate and the pulse rate. Heart rate decreased from 124 beat per minute to 80 per beat per minute, and the pulse was reduced from 100 beat per minute to 80. Apex pulse deficit became 0. There was no deficit left, with gradual relief in the symptoms. So now it's a period of, in a period of 24 hours, patient is much better. In a period of 48 hours, completely resolved. So now the learning from this particular case, I always share my learning and my understanding from this particular case, or any case which I do. First is, how do we approach a cardiological case? How do we keep all the investigation modalities in mind? And how do we do a planning and programming of the treatment which may be required in case our homeopathic line of treatment fail? So this is also very important. We should always have a backup plan. Third, differential diagnosis in cardiological cases. We need to have understanding of differential diagnosis, role of investigations, concept of one-sided diseases, and role of monitoring in the cardiac case. Approach to various cardiac remedies, and concept of doctrine of remedy. Concept of doctrine of remedy is very, very important. So these are the 2 cases which I have shared. So up till now, any doubts or anything which we like to discuss? There are furthermore cases. If the audience is comfortable, we can go on the 3rd case.
Shadi doctor?
Yeah, can we start with the 3rd case?
How long it will take, doctor, for the 3rd case?
Another half an hour.
Okay, that will be too late for us, so we need to wind up before that. I can give you, we can have another day to continue your presentation.
That's why I thought that
Yeah.
all the participants should be comfortable.
Yeah.
So these are two cases which I shared from my experience. There are
Okay.
further 2 cases. We can do it some other time.
Yes, surely.
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah.
So nice. And we will go to the question and answer session now.